It's time for this week's episode of Brandon's Sports Talk.
Welcome back to Brandon's Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview the USA's Paralympians Track and Field and Biathlon, Danielle Aravich. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Brandon?
I'm doing amazing. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to start competing?
I fell into Paralympic sport a little differently than a lot of my peers. I grew up being an athlete in able-bodied sports despite missing my left hand and forearm. And I went on to run college track and cross country, but I was very focused on my career in business while I was in the latter years of college, and I wanted to work in the business side of professional sports. So I interned while I was in school for an NFL team and an NBA team and landed my first job for an NBA team. So it was actually always my dream to work in professional sports, but not necessarily be an athlete myself. And it was while I was there that I was working and not feeling fulfilled in my job like I thought I would be. And I was told about the Paralympics and looked into it and started training from there. So it kind of came about in an unconventional way.
What was it like going to Butler and obviously being a track and field athlete?
I went to Butler somewhat on a whim. I didn't know much about the school. I was born and raised in Boise, Idaho, and Butler's in Indianapolis, Indiana. So quite a ways away, didn't know anyone who went to the school, but I really enjoyed my conversations with their assistant cross-country coach. And so I went out and I only competed for a year because I was getting hurt a lot my freshman year and just having a hard time balancing collegiate athletics with school. So I did cross country running, indoor track and field, outdoor track and field. And then after that summer, I decided I was just going to focus on school.
How did you know that you wanted to be a triathlon?
So I had no idea I was going to do 3 different sports for Paralympics. It's while I was training for track and field that I was recruited by a Paralympic Nordic ski coach, so cross-country skiing. And from there, I got to try out cross-country skiing and biathlon. And so I ended up competing in 3 different sports in the 2 games, Tokyo and Beijing. But again, it kind of came to me, I guess, the adding the 2 other sports, and I never really expected that that's the path I would be going down.
Of course, what was that feeling like when you did get approached obviously by the cross country, going to the cross country?
I was surprised because I had never cross country skied before, but it's a pretty niche sport within the US. And then with throwing in the Paralympic aspect, it's very niche. So a lot of the athletes on the team had come from other backgrounds in sport. Like someone was a prior cyclist, someone was a prior triathlete, someone was a prior wheelchair racer. And so they found success in recruiting people from other sports since it is a big endurance sport. And it was very flattering to get to try it out. And I honestly went into my first camp doing it, just expecting to have tried it for the week, had a fun time. We got to go to Colorado for it. But by the end of it, I was pretty hooked on it. And so I decided to add that sport to my resume.
What was it like, obviously, making the national team for the track and field side?
When I qualified in track for Tokyo, it was a sigh of relief because it was the thing that got me started in Paralympic sport was trying to qualify for the Tokyo Games. And then we obviously had the delay of the games by a year. So after adding a full another year of trying to balance multiple sports and trying to figure out, how this would all work financially, it was a big sigh of relief to know I made the team and was going to be going to Tokyo.
Of course, within that time, what was it like, obviously, in those months preparing for not just the Summer Olympics, but the Winter Olympics too?
The summer leading into the two was really challenging. I spent my entire winter of 2021 skiing, and I basically had a week in between my last ski race and the start of track season. So I had to make the jump over really quickly and didn't get much of a break. But that summer, after I knew I was going to be going to Tokyo and we were hoping I could qualify for Beijing, I kind of had to take these two training plans, one for training for the 400 meter in track and field, which is a sprint, and then training for cross country skiing and biathlon, which is much longer distance, much more anaerobic endurance sport based. So it was kind of a hodgepodge of two training plans and probably wasn't executed perfectly. And I think sometimes communicating with the multiple coaches and trying to figure out how it would all work wasn't always seamless or perfect, but I'm really happy we were still able to accomplish the two. But to be honest, I'm not upset about the fact that I won't have to do that again because it was a bit hectic and chaotic and confusing at times. So it'll be nice to just focus in the next 4 years on skiing and biathlon.
Of course, what was that feeling like, obviously, on the track and field side, competing for the national team?
I think my experience in Tokyo with the track team was really cool and really amazing in a lot of ways, but it was also really challenging in others. It was my first time competing for Team USA internationally in running, and I didn't know a lot of people going into it on the team. And so I kind of felt at first like an outsider, but luckily I was able to make some friendships while we were over in Japan for the month, and find a community within there. But I almost felt like still somewhat of an outsider in terms of track and field world because everyone on our team was so focused on track and field was their end all be all, which is obviously what it should be for people. But for me, I had this other thing that was drawing my attention at the same time. So it was kind of an interesting balance of feeling like I'm trying to give everything in this month in Japan to training for track and field, but at the same time, I have to be thinking ahead to what's going to happen in 6 months.
What was that feeling like of going to the 2021 World Cup?
The World Cup was my first international ski race in, I believe, February 2021 in Slovenia. And it was a big shock because I was so new to skiing and we didn't have any international competitions for that entirety of the year because of the pandemic. So when they did make the decision as a team that they were going to send a group over to Slovenia for this final World Cup, I was really surprised to get the call that I had made the team, just again, being so new to the sport and only having done like a handful of races at that point. I just genuinely didn't assume I would have qualified for an international competition. But it was a really great experience, and not a whole lot of countries were able to come just again due to the pandemic and traveling. But it was my first time getting to see some of my competition that I would then a year later be seeing in Beijing.
Of course, going to Tokyo, what was it like going to Tokyo and being in the Paralympians for this summer?
Going to Tokyo, I feel like I can't even say I went to Tokyo because we weren't able to go out and explore and see anything. We were limited to the village and our venue. So for our venue, it was the Olympic Stadium where track and field takes place. So it was kind of difficult to feel like you're in this new amazing, incredible place, but not able to explore it. And they did a great job with the Paralympic and Olympic villages. The housing was great, the food was great, everything was really well done by the organizing committee there in Japan. But it is a bummer in the COVID times that we aren't able to get out and explore and do more things while we're in these foreign countries.
Of course, what were the typical rituals and game day like when you were on the track and field side in Tokyo?
Our typical days, I was only in one competition, and so there was a chance I would only race the once, and if I made the finals, I would race twice. And I was actually the first day of track and field. So I was not in the village for a significantly long amount of time. We had gone to a training camp at an Air Force base in Japan, a few hours away for the weeks leading up to start getting humidity acclimated. But I wasn't in the village for a super long time. But our daily lives were basically training, eating, recovering, going to our sports medicine, maybe to our sports psychologist, and just trying to create our normal patterns from home so that we could feel comfortable and ready to compete.
What was that feeling like of getting to put on that track and field jersey with US on it and also having the Paralympic rings on the jersey?
That for me was a pretty special moment when I got to finally wear my USA singlet and be at my first games. It was definitely overwhelming. And I think despite the fact that there was not fans in the stadium, you could still feel the magnitude of what you were about to do and where you were at. And again, for me, Tokyo was just this epitome of changing really my life around, from going from being a corporate employee working to doing this whole Paralympic journey thing. So the moment of Tokyo for me was really special. And unfortunately, my race was not how I wanted it to go. And it was not the ending that I wanted, especially now that I'm not going to be competing in track and field any longer. It is a bummer to think that was kind of my one shot, was that one 60-second race. And I just felt afterwards pretty embarrassed and pretty let down, and that I had potentially let down others, when in all reality, I didn't really let down anyone else but myself, because I wasn't even expected to make the Tokyo Games. So the fact I was even there was an accomplishment in itself.
What was it like going to the Winter Paralympians and obviously going to Beijing?
For Beijing, we were actually in a village that was about 4 hours from the city of Beijing. So again, I can't even feel like could say that I ever visited Beijing, but the Winter Games were much different. The village was set up significantly different, and the food was not as good as the Tokyo food, and the village was also a lot smaller because it didn't have to accommodate quite as many athletes. But my games experience as a whole there was really special because I got to race a lot. I had some good races and I was really proud of my performances. But it was also really sad and hard to be there while we were, because it was right when the war was starting in Ukraine, and a lot of our competition are Ukrainians in the cross-country ski world. So it was definitely emotional for everyone involved and really difficult to watch what was happening not horribly far from where we were at the time.
What was the difference in feeling like obviously getting to put on your winter Paralympic gear versus obviously the summer Paralympic gear?
I almost felt like when I was getting ready and preparing to race for Beijing, I almost felt like I had some experience, even though it was my first Winter Games and in a totally different sport. But quite a few of my teammates for Beijing were also, this was their first games ever. So I almost felt like I was able to help and have them lean on me for advice and things that came with the games and the emotions and the pressure of the event. But it was a really big honor to know that I had not only represented my country once in the summer, but now I had the opportunity to represent my country in 4 more races.
Of course, what was the feeling like going down the slopes and the cross country side?
Cross country, our venue was actually from the Olympics, the Olympic Biathlon venue. And so it was really cool to get to be on the same trails that we had just watched the Olympians be on. And it was really funny because our weather was significantly warmer than the Olympics, and the Olympics had just been 2 weeks prior, but we were skiing in t-shirts and people in shorts. Whereas the Olympics, they were with freezing temperatures every single day. But the course in Beijing, I really enjoyed. I thought it was fun, it was fast, it was manageable, and I really enjoyed skiing there.
How's that like sharing that special moment of also being on the same course as the Olympians?
I think it's really cool to be able to be in the same villages, eating the same food, training on the same venues, competing on the same venues as the Olympics, because I definitely grew up watching the Olympics and not necessarily the Paralympics. But for all of us Paralympians, we are trying to make it a priority that people care to tune into the Paralympics and aren't just shutting off their TVs as soon as the Olympics are done, but are actually tuning in and watching and cheering for Team USA when we compete in the Paralympics. And I think a lot of people assume that like we'll be in different areas or be in different villages. And sometimes people have even asked me if it's in the same location as the Olympics. It's like, yes, it is. We are, again, not lesser than the Olympics. We are like the sister piece to the Olympics. And so we're trying to make people understand that while it is different, it is also very similar. And it will always just be the 2 weeks after the Olympics wrap up, the Paralympics will start.
What is it like obviously training and performing in the biathlon?
Biathlon is a very difficult sport, combining rifle target shooting and cross-country skiing. It requires a lot of detailed preparation, a lot of focused attention, and it's really difficult. And I still am far, far, far from mastering it, but it provides a lot of variability in a cross-country race, which adds a layer of fun because the best cross-country skier might not be the best shooter. So that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll win, and vice versa. And you could be the best shooter, but your skiing might not be up to par and someone can miss their shots and still beat you. So it definitely adds a different element of fun, I think, into cross-country skiing.
What were some of your favorite memories and moments as a biathlon?
In Beijing, some of my favorite moments for biathlon were my first race was a sprint race, which means we had 2 shooting stages. So you take 10 shots, 5 shots each shooting stage. And I've been really struggling with my shooting the past 2 years since joining biathlon. And so my first stage of that, I was really nervous. I felt a little uneasy. So I was almost anticipating I wouldn't shoot well because I wasn't able to really feel calm and prepared coming into my first shooting stage. But I did have a first clean shooting stage for that race. And unfortunately, my only one of the games, but it was really nice in my head to know, like, despite the magnitude of the event and the pressure I was feeling, I was still able to shoot well.
Of course, in biathlon, what is it like obviously coming down the slope and then obviously quickly getting ready to shoot?
You have to start preparing, and usually we pick a target place when we're practicing before competition because the venues are each so different. You pick an area of the venue that's probably like 15 to 20 seconds out from coming into the range, and you're still skiing, but you might back off a little bit in terms of the intensity, and you might start to try to take deeper breaths while skiing and try to calm your heart rate to a certain extent. And then when you get into the range and you get your rifle and you're about to take your first shot, you really try to make the world stand still. Like, you'll hear announcers, you'll hear other people skiing by taking their shots. So you really try to make the world almost stand still for those few moments that you need to take your 5 shots.
What is that feeling like after you take your 5 shots and going down the slope to your next 5 shots?
After you get up from a shooting stage and are heading out, it's either the greatest feeling in the world or the worst feeling in the world, because you're either knowing that you're going to have to go do penalty laps, which are the penalty for missing a shot is doing an extra small lap of skiing. And so it's pretty demoralizing to be having to enter the penalty range and be doing penalty laps when you see your competition going off to continue their next leg before their next shooting stage. But when you do get out of a shooting stage and you're clean and you get to just start skiing the next lap and avoid the penalty lap, it's a pretty outstanding feeling to know you were able to do that, and you're saving your body quite a bit of distress as well by not having to ski extra.
How has obviously your cross skiing helped you in your biathlon time?
I think for me, while shooting's very important and I'm trying to work on it, my development in my cross country skiing was able to still help my results in biathlon despite some poor shooting. So while I've gotten better at cross country skiing, now my results in biathlon are getting better. And now I'm just hoping, especially this summer, to really focus in on my shooting so that when it comes to next season and our next competitions, I'm molding together that cross country skiing I've been working on with more accurate shooting as well.
What were some of your game day rituals on the Winter Paralympic side?
For the Winter Games, my typical race times were around noon. So I got to sleep in a little bit till like 9 or so. I would usually eat a breakfast, have coffee, and begin doing some stretching and any extra recovery. I have some knee issues, so I'd go to our sports medicine, have my knee taped and ready to go. And then we'd head to our venue about an hour and a half beforehand, be able to chill and hang out and just refuel a little bit, do our warm up, and then get ready for race time. And for the games, you always have to get to your start time a little bit early, just for all of the TV stuff that's going on. And so we'd head out to the start line a little bit early and kind of jog around, warm up a little bit more, get a pep talk from our coaches, and then be ready for whenever our start time was.
How does it feel to know that you're a Paralympian in the winter biathlon and cross skiing?
It's still kind of unbelievable to me that I was able to, in just 2.5 years of cross country skiing, qualify for skiing and biathlon. And it feels a little bit unreal. And it also felt really spectacular to see that despite me being newer to the sport, I was still able to be in the mix with some people who have been skiing all their lives. And it definitely motivated me so much to the point that I'm giving up for the next few years trying to qualify for summer just to focus on winter. So it was a really special feeling, and it definitely, I think, proved to me that this is where I should be.
Of course, as you talked about preparing, what are some of the things that you're preparing now for this next upcoming Winter Paralympics?
So this summer, we get a lot of our base fitness training in. So we will go on lots of bike rides, runs, do some swims, and we'll spend a lot of time shooting. We will have a decently filled summer with training, mostly in our home base of Bozeman, Montana, and potentially with a few training camps. In the fall, we might head off to Europe to go to some areas that will have snow significantly sooner than here in the US. And then we'll probably have another month-long training camp in Canada in the late fall. And then our winter season will start, and we'll have a few trips to Europe for another World Championships, a World Cup, and then we'll actually have a World Cup here in the US. So we have a pretty full year of competitions despite it being the year right after the games.
Who are some people that you look up to in the track and field community and the biathlon community?
I think what's been really cool is getting to actually meet some of the people on the Olympic side who I really respected from track and biathlon. Molly Seidel is one that I absolutely think is the most incredible runner and person, who's the Olympic marathon bronze medalist. And I got to meet her just a few weeks ago at a Team USA event. And I definitely fangirled over her quite a bit when we met. And she was just a great person. And I've gotten to know quite a few of the US biathletes. I really respect Deidre Irwin, who had the highest place finish in a long time from a US biathlete. I believe it was 9th or 10th place in one of the races in Beijing, and getting to know them. It's really cool to be able to not only look up to them, but now know them as individual people.
What advice would you give somebody looking to go on the track and field side in the Paralympics?
For the Paralympics, to get into track and field, the process can definitely seem overwhelming. Depending on where you live, there are a lot of adaptive sports organizations that are there and have helped people get on a Paralympic route. But I think the best advice is to, if you are able to train with your local able-bodied school team or club team. But if you're not able to, definitely look to different adaptive nonprofits for assistance and help in figuring out how to get the right equipment and how to start your training process. But I think the earlier you can start the process, the better. I kind of started significantly late, only starting about 2 years before the games ended up happening. So the sooner you can start training, start figuring out where you can hit qualifying criteria, where you can get classified, that will be very important.
What advice would you give people looking to go on to the biathlon side?
For biathlon in the Paralympics, we are a really small community with para-Nordic and para-biathlon, and our coaches are constantly looking for new talent to bring into our program. And so our coaches are happy and willing, and so are all the athletes, to give anyone personal advice on how to start getting the process going. But definitely checking out the Paralympic Nordic website for Team USA, and they will have a lot of good information on there on what it's like to qualify, where there's going to be competitions, etc.
What advice would you give somebody looking to go to the Paralympics for the first time or multiple times like you did?
I think that when you're going to the games for the first time, you have to just be realistic that it's not all going to be sunshine and roses. There's going to be a lot of hard times emotionally, physically, and it is a spectacular experience. You're going to meet new people, you're going to experience a new culture, you're going to see new things, but it's also going to be hard. And I think a lot of people feel guilt after returning from the games, and I've heard this on the Olympic and the Paralympic side. People feel this guilt that it wasn't everything they thought it would be, and even people who medaled or had really great races sometimes come home and just feel this emptiness and this kind of sense of not feeling fully fulfilled, and that's totally normal. And I think it's just being able to lean on your teammates and fellow athletes to understand that a lot of people are feeling the same way you're feeling.
That's great advice. Where can my listeners find you at on social media?
My social media handles right now, I think, are all at the One Arm Dan, spelled out TheOneArmDan.
Thank you again, Danielle Aravich, for your interview, and best of luck in your future in the biathlon.
Thank you.
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon. You can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Danielle Aravich, for your interview, and best of luck in your future.
Thank you.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.